All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show at Levi's Stadium with a little update on Thursday down here in 49er land as the Niners get ready to take on the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, first of all, there was a report earlier today. J.J. Watt had the announcement that Zach Ertz has requested to be released and has been put on waivers by the Arizona Cardinals. Now, the former Monta Vista tight end, former Stanford tight end, is 33, and he's been granted his release. Now, he goes through waivers. Will the Niners pick him up off waivers is the question. He's 33. He's a three-time Pro Bowler. You know, he's got an $11.6 million cap figure this year, and if you pick him off waivers, you're going to be responsible for the prorated portion of that, which is probably right around $2.6 million. Does he want to play for Philly? He wants to play for a contender, according to J.J. Watt. So he'd like to re-sign with a contender and make another run at a Super Bowl. He tore his ACL in November of 2022. He had an injury earlier this year that put him on the IR. Does he want to play in Philly where he started his career and maybe step in for Dallas Goedert? I mean, that's always potentially possible. Does he want to play for the 49ers and play in his backyard? You know, as I said, he went to Monta Vista. He's a Danville kid. So that is going to be really interesting to see who gets Zach Ertz. Does he wind up in Philly? Does he wind up with the Niners? The Niners have George Kittle, obviously Charlie Warner, Ross Dwelly. They're not really using Braden Willis. Cam Latu is on the IR. His season's over. Warner's really a blocker. I mean, at this point, I think Ertz is kind of best as a receiver. He's a receiving tight end. So the question is, do they prefer Ertz to Ross Dwelly? I mean, that probably ultimately is what the decision comes down to. And would the Niners pick him up off waivers, and they're far enough beneath the cap? Would they pay him the 2.5 or whatever it is that he's owed for the rest of this year, or are they going to wait for him to clear waivers? Will he clear waivers? That's the question. He's made it be known that he'd like to play in a contender, so non-contending teams probably would not pick him up. Very interesting. Very interesting. Does he wind up in Philly? He could step in for Dallas Goedert. I don't know if he would play as soon as this weekend, but Zach Ertz is a good football player. So do the Niners show interest in Zach Ertz? I think I'll be looking for that in the next couple of weeks. Also, the head official for the game on Sunday is Alex Kemp. He did officiate week 1 against the Niners, or Niners Steelers in Pittsburgh, when the Niners were called for 11 penalties. I don't know if you're one of those people that keeps track of the officials, but there you go. Alex Kemp will be the lead official in Niners-Eagles on Sunday. We talked to Arik Armstead today. He's got a foot injury, and I don't think he's going to play. He didn't practice yesterday. I don't think he's going to practice today, but he says he's going to play. He's going to show up on Sunday, and he's going to play in Philly. So foot injury and all, expect Armstead to go on Sunday. He's no longer with us, but man, how could we not mention that today is the late Bill Walsh's birthday? One of the greatest football coaches in the history of the NFL. Some would argue the greatest. His tree is extensive. Walsh, you could argue the Niners wouldn't have any of these Super Bowls if Bill Walsh had never become the 49ers head coach in the late 1970s. He's no longer with us, but today is his birthday, and happy birthday to Bill Walsh, even though he's no longer with us. Steve Wilkes talked to us today on the podium, and he just said that he feels like this is the best offensive line that they've faced all year, and that it all starts with Jason Kelce. He considers Kelce a Hall of Famer. I think most people do. He was asked what makes Kelce Kelce. He said, man, his knowledge of the game is really top shelf. He said that he's a major component of their famous play, the tush push. And, then he was asked about how the Niners are going to defend the tush push. And he's like, hey, there's no secrets to it. More than anything, it's just important that the Niners play good defense on first and second down and try to keep them out of that tush push area. He said, we got to win on first and second down. That's really the key. He talked about Demo Lenore and how he can play inside and outside, and how he's really has, it's that desire to play both spots, that his run fits. He's really worked hard on his run fits. I mean, when you play inside as a slot corner, you're essentially a linebacker. When you play outside, you're essentially a corner. So it's two dramatically different positions, but he said the key to it is that Demo wants to do it. He takes great pride in it, and that he works really, really hard to become a better run defender, and I think we've seen that. I asked him how he prepares. The Niners have 5 young, really talented defensive backs that may not have ever played on this kind of stage or in this atmosphere. And he said, there's no shortcuts, and just basically keep the focus on us, what we're doing. Keep the focus on their improvement. Don't worry about the surroundings. Don't worry about the environment, and just keep the focus on each guy getting better, and no excuses. I mean, there's not. He's like, basically, hey, you know what? We can talk all day about this and that, but there's no excuses, and he didn't want to make any. He was asked about the key to Jalen Hurts, and he said, he shows a lot of poise, a lot of confidence. He says it's an RPO offense, and you really have to be ready to stop those RPO running plays. He was asked about Jair Brown, and he said that he thought he did a great job in Seattle, and that his communication on the practice field has really been exemplary, and he likes what he sees out of Jair. When it came time to talk about Hargrave and Armstead, Steve said that one thing he's noticed is since the bye week, Hargrave and Armstead have their legs back, and I think I would agree with him, and those guys are both playing at a really, really high level. He was asked about Mooney Ward, and he did travel with DK, but that was part of the plan. He wouldn't specify whether he'll travel this week with an A.J. Brown or a Devontae Smith. I think he'll wind up probably playing sides in this game, but they felt like the matchup with DK was so strong in Mooney's favor that they wanted him to travel with DK wherever DK went, and so that was the plan last week. That does not mean that he's going to travel with A.J. Brown to different sides of the formation. He was asked about spying a running quarterback. He's like, hey, I'd love to have 12 defenders out there, but the league's not going to let me do that. And he talked about what was the key to A.J. Brown. He said he's strong, but he's got deceptive speed. He's a big, strong guy, 225 pounds, but there's deception with A.J. Brown because he's much faster than you think. Had a chance to talk to Brock Purdy. He was on the podium today, and he just said that, he's not making it a big deal, this going back to Philly. He said it's just trying to treat it as just another game. And he basically talked about last year's game, and he said, hey, we never really got to get into our game plan. He wasn't making excuses, but he was like, hey, he just said it's a new year, and he's not looking at it as a revenge game. He said, he was asked how he's a different player now than he was last year when the Niners played there in the playoffs. And he said he's grown within the playbook, and he's grown within his relationships with his receivers. And then he was asked, does it feel like a bigger stage? And he said, every single game is huge for the 49ers because they're in a playoff run. And, he kind of pushed back on the idea that this was a bigger game than just a Week 13 game. He was asked, probably the most interesting part of what Brock said, he was asked about the rain. And, they mentioned that the rain is likely. And he said, last year it came in the middle of a drive, or earlier this year, I should say, against Cleveland. The rain came down in the middle of a drive. And then he said, a lot of it is like if it's light rain, he doesn't feel like he needs to wear a glove. But if it's heavy rain, he may opt to wear a glove in this game if it's heavy rain, just so he has a better grip on the football. I thought that was interesting. He said he's worn a glove before in college, and that if it was heavy rain and lots of precipitation, that he actually might bust out a glove and wear a glove in this game. I asked him the question because it seems like every time I talk to people in Philly, they're like, Brock Purdy's the weak link. Brock Purdy's the weak link. All the Philly fans are saying, well, the Niners have a ton of talent, but Brock Purdy's not going to come in here and beat us. And so I asked Brock, I said, the dialogue that I'm hearing is they feel like you're the weak link, and how does that sit with you? And, he's like, and I was trying to just poke at him a little bit because I know how competitive he is. He said, I'm just trying to do my job to help the 49ers win. But he also added, hey, I hadn't heard that before. I hadn't heard that I was the weak link. And anything for added motivation, I guess, would be the answer to that. And as far as the back and forth jawing between the two teams, he's like, hey, it's just another game for him. He said he hears stuff around the facility, It makes him laugh, but that he's not in, that's not his way. He was asked if he had heard from Hassan Reddick after the injury last year, and he's like, no, not. It's just a game, and it's just guys get hurt all the time. And he didn't need to hear from Hassan Reddick, nor did he. He basically went on to say that the Eagles are likely the biggest challenge of the year for the 49ers. And I think everybody understands that. It's the Niners and the Eagles and the Niners in the NFC. We had a chance to talk to Chris Forster, and he said that, Philly is a great rush group. He said that their second team D-line can really rush the passer, and the Niners have to be ready for it. He talked about Hassan Reddick and how he's got a great get-off and great speed, and that he's really developed into an elite pass rusher. And obviously Colton McKivitz is going to have his hands full with Reddick. He also said that he plays with great leverage, and that he kind of applauded Reddick for really developing from just a good player with Arizona to one of the league's best now in Philadelphia. I asked him about John Feliciano and Feliciano's strengths over Burford. He didn't want to get into, Feliciano's strengths over Burford, but I said, what are Feliciano's strengths, Burford aside? And he said, he's really reliable in pass protection. His experience level is the edge that he has over Burford. And when he was talking about his offensive line, Forster said, hey, our O-line is a work in progress. We're not there yet. He said Philly's really tough against, tough to run against because they defeat blocks well. And then I asked him about Jalen Carter. I said, what really separates Jalen Carter? What stands out on film about the big defensive tackle, who might be the defensive rookie of the year in the league? And he just said he's explosive. He's explosive as a pass rusher. Then we went in the locker room, and I had a chance to talk to a couple players. Ambry Thomas told me that he is familiar with Devontae Smith, that the two of them faced off in the bowl game when Alabama took on Michigan, and that he had success against Devontae. He didn't say that meant that he would have success in this game, but he definitely feels like he can draw on that experience against Devontae. George Kittle told us that he really looks forward to the matchup with any linebacker. That includes Philly's linebackers. He says he loves when he gets matched up on linebackers. He says that Kyle installs plays on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and that's when he gets really excited about the game plan. He said Kyle's game plans are fun to be a part of. He said he got over that Philly loss last year in about a week. And then he was asked about comparing, teams from last year to this year, and he's like, hey, man, it's two different teams than from a year ago. He's like, we've got Javon Hargrave now on our side. We have a different team. They have a different team. Didn't want to get too much into comparisons. And then we got a chance to talk to Arik Armstead. And Armstead was asked about the tush push because he's right in the middle of the action. And he said, our goal is to make sure to keep them out of position to run that play. In other words, win on first and second down. He talked about how Jalen Ertz is an elite quarterback in their scheme. He said, we're excited for the challenge this week. I asked him, do O-lines block you guys differently since Chase Young has come aboard? And he said, really, O-lines have blocked us differently since 2019. He said teams, they'll leave extra guys in to block, they'll chip us. And he said he's noticed a difference since 2019 on how the Niners' defensive line is treated by opposing offensive lines. He was asked about the foot injury, and he made it perfectly clear. He's like, foot injury aside, I'm going to be out there on Sunday. So Armstead's going to go on Sunday. He was asked about Oregon and UW, who play Friday night, and he said it's sad that the Pac-12 is coming to an end, but he's rooting hard for his Ducks to beat the Huskies in the Pac-12 title game. And then we talked a little bit about Javon Kinlaw, and he just said how he's really proud of Kinlaw's development. He's super proud of Kinlaw. He said they have a great relationship. He also says that Kinlaw helps him motivate him on game day, that Kinlaw will sometimes say to him, hey, man, these guys can't block you. So I thought it was interesting listening to that dialogue back and forth between Armstead talking a little bit about his relationship with young Javon Kinlaw, who had a huge pressure that led to the Ambry Thomas interception on Thanksgiving night against Seattle. And, of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue you're going to find in Northern California. This video is brought to you by Mojo Fantasy. Check that link in the description. And make sure you use the promo code KRUG, KRUEG, and they'll match you up to your first $100. And thanks to all you guys for supporting The Krug Show on YouTube.